Now back to our top story, the federal budget deficit and the government's determination to achieve a surplus by 2012-13. I was joined from our Melbourne studio a short time ago by the opposition's finance spokesman, Andrew Robb. Andrew Robb, many thanks for talking to Lateline tonight.
My pleasure, Ali.
The government has found the savings it says will deliver a surplus, a small surplus, but a surplus nonetheless. They're introducing bigger cuts to the public service as one way to get there. They're to be commended, aren't they, for trying to rein in public spending?
Well, they've got a blowout of, what is it, $26 billion in debt. We heard tonight Wayne Swan on the 7:30 report for about 15 minutes. I don't think the word debt passed his lips, but I'm sure he'd say that, unfortunately, I think the dog ate the government's homework yet again this year. There seems to be excuses every year. I suppose our concern is that we feel they have left the economy in a far more vulnerable position than it need be. And, you know, there is $87 billion of stimulus money, and much of that was not necessary. And, in fact, it has put us in really quite a precarious position if there is any sort of serious rundown in commodity prices.
And yet the country's top 100 CEOs, those represented by the Business Council, those we imagine to be your natural allies, they say this is the right economic policy for the times. Quote, it will send a strong signal to households, business and investors that Australia can keep its house in order.
Well, that would be good if it was true. You see...
so all those CEOs, the Business Council, they're all wrong?
Well, I don't think they have properly studied the detail in this budget. We have seen again a debt blowout by $26 billion in the last 5 months, and it's not accounted for. We have seen some shameless financial or fiscal trickery. This is a hoax. The deficit is a hoax. I mean, they are billions of dollars really short of what is the reality in this budget, and they've done this year in, year out. They're now complaining that they're not getting as much revenue as they thought. But you look back the last budget and the budget before, every time we have said, and others, that the forecasts are Pollyanna-like, that they are, you know, the top end, the most optimistic forecasts, given that, you know, the world knew Europe was still to make a major adjustment. The world knew that the US was going to stumble along for some time, and yet they have been assuming that the 140-year highs in terms of trade will continue.
At the same time, though, against that backdrop of a very difficult international environment, for the first time now, Australia has been given top marks by all 3 major ratings agencies for the first time ever. Do we take that with a grain of salt?
No, we don't. No, we don't. But look, it's not a point of comparing us necessarily with a number of basket cases around the world, and that's really what's happening at the moment. I mean, Europe is on the cusp of certainly a major recession, if not a lot worse than that.
Yes, but those ratings agencies are not just rating the basket cases of the world. They are rating every major economy.
No, well, we're talking about major economies. You know, we're talking about the European community, which is a basket of major, you know, established, seasoned economies. And some of those are looking to look like they will default, and others going down with them. I mean, the whole euro looks like, I think, it's likely to spin apart. I can't see how they will patch that up and pull themselves out of the problems they're in. It might take 2 or 3 years, but it's coming. So you've got a situation where a number of major economies are basket cases. They've lived beyond their means. Now, we're blessed with China, right? If you took away China, our underlying structural deficit is actually worse than Italy's.
But we've still got a AAA rating, all 3 ratings agencies, first time ever in Australia's history.
We have, but much of that, if you know, the Business Council and others read the reasons for that, they would see that the ratings agency said, firstly, that they've given that to Australia compared with the other major economies because of structural features which has served Australia well over the last 2 decades. Not the last 2 years, the last 2 decades. So the reason they have re-rated us is because of the earlier strong financial management. And the second thing they did say, and they really qualified this, they said that that we are very suspect to any sort of decline in commodity prices. That will affect our public finances severely. And they said from a finance point of view that we have got a major risk. We're really not AAA rating quality in terms of that external financial exposure that we've got.
Well, let's move on and look at the cuts to the public service. A one-off increase in the efficiency dividend. Penny Wong says the cuts will come through reductions in travel, consultants, advertising and hospitality. They're exactly the sort of areas that should be targeted, aren't they? And how much better in terms of cutting to the public service could the Coalition do?
Well, we had committed to maintaining public service numbers, a real cut, but not removing or anyone forcing any redundancies. We said that we would not replace any people for 2 years.
Yeah, Joe Hockey said 12,000 public servants redundant in the first 2 years.
That's the first 2 years if you don't replace anybody. But this is a much higher efficiency dividend than we were looking at, and yet they were criticising our efficiency dividend and said that it would and must imply public service cuts. Well, of course, now Penny Wong and Wayne Swan say that no, that's not necessary, even though 2/3 or 3/4 of the bills in all of these departments are in fact wages.
But how does your policy of 12,000 public servants to be made redundant voluntarily, you're saying no forced redundancy in the first 2 years, yet you've also got a policy that says you'll scrap the Department of Climate Change? I understand that includes something like 15,000 people.
Well, we're yet to detail all of this. We will show what our cuts will be. The 12,000 was from last time. We said we'll repeat that. But in the main, we will wait to see. We've still got possibly 2 budgets. And if you base it on this MyEFO, I mean, this MyEFO has blown out in the space of 5 months by $15 billion.
But can you confirm...
The debt has gone up $26 billion.
Can you confirm the decision to scrap the Department of Climate Change? Are you saying that on top of your 12,000 you'll now be adding more?
We have said that we will combine the department, we will get rid of the Department of Climate Change, and those functions will be, in a modified version, part of the Department of Environment. So that is a decision we have announced. But how that would work, what numbers are involved, we're not going to make final decisions until we get through, as I say, possibly 2 budgets. We think this is a house of cards. There are all sorts of trickery. They have brought not just infrastructure forward, which I don't think will be spent anyway because it's joint spending with the states. So Wayne Swan said, who would oppose any bringing forward of any infrastructure? Well, the states who haven't got the money may well oppose it. And the other thing is there's on top of that about $5 or $6 billion of money either brought forward or delayed to create what I think will be a very artificial surplus or something near a surplus.
But even with what we know now about your policy, disregarding what might happen in the next 2 years, you've got a major challenge, haven't you, to find the spending cuts. You've agreed that you'll keep the increase in compulsory super, but you'll scrap the mining tax, which the government says will pay for it. You've agreed you'll keep the compensation for a carbon tax, but you'll scrap the carbon tax itself. Is the $70 billion that you've said in the past you've got to find, is that $70 billion now looking like something substantially higher?
Well, we haven't said that our task is 70 billion. We don't know yet what the task is until we see...
But that's your best guess, isn't it? I mean, the 16th of August, you said it's an estimate of the sort of challenge we'll have. September the 4th, it's not a 30. We came out with the figure.
That was put forward as the order of magnitude. But look, just start to strip that away. If you take off $31 billion of carbon tax, and then you take off 9 or 11 billion, whatever it is, of mining tax, and you don't replace most of that spending, already you've cut that figure well over half. I mean, so it is assumed, a place in the debate which is meaningless, in fact.
But with respect, Andrew, Robb, it's a place in the debate that you've actually given it. I mean, as I say, and I'm only giving you two examples, you've said that it's your estimate of the sort of challenge you face, $70 billion. How else are we meant to read that but as being your best guess at this point of the challenge you face?
Well, what I'm saying is it is a meaningless debate because, firstly, it takes no account of the fact that we are going to remove taxes worth tens of billions of dollars against which there is expenditure by this government which we won't incur, right? So there is, straight away, you've got a situation which is quite different. Secondly, there's still another two budgets to go before we go to an election. So
sure, but
we've got the situation in Europe, we've got China likely to come back.
But you say you're removing some of those taxes and the expenditure that goes with it, but in fact isn't part of your issue that you're removing the taxes but not the expenditure that goes with it. You're keeping the compensation for the carbon tax, as I said, and indeed you're keeping the super changes.
We don't need to forever keep the compensation for the carbon tax. There's certainly the compensation to industry. Why would we pay that if we've removed the carbon tax?
Right, and what about the personal tax cuts? Why pay them if you remove the carbon tax?
We're going to make personal income tax cuts. That's something that we have consistently done through government. It's not just something related to a carbon tax. We're not committing to giving exactly the types of cuts that the government is intending to give related to the carbon tax. We will announce a body of personal tax cuts in due course before the election. So what I'm saying is that the discussion is meaningless. We know we've got a substantial task. This government, in our view, has spent and taxed and taxed. It is why we've got the third fastest growth of public debt in the developed world. That's behind Iceland and Ireland. So, we are catching up very rapidly, and if commodity prices came off for whatever reason, Europe, China, or a combination of both, our structural deficit is such that we could be facing next year another $50 billion,
All right.
$50 billion deficit year on year.
All right. Andrew, we talked earlier about the support of the business community for the government surplus. Big business is also increasingly unhappy with the state of industrial relations in this country. David Murray told Lateline last night he sees no programs to improve productivity in Australia. Business is constantly telling you that they're not happy, they want more flexibility in the workplace. Do you share the disappointment of business that the opposition is not responding?
It's not a question. We're not in government, Ali. We're not in government, right? We are becoming...
But you are the alternative government, aren't you? And in theory, with the parliament we've got, almost at any point there could be an election.
Almost, but in all likelihood, with the tricks and the...
But isn't it your job to engage in the debate, to provide an alternative policy?
Speaker, it could go 2 years. So we've got to be ready for something now or ready for something in 2 years' time.
So what industrial relations, what are you ready for now?
Well, we have done a lot of work, but we have said to business, and they are responding, we've said, you tell us what is going wrong with the workplace relations. You tell us what's wrong with the Fair Work Act. And we are now being presented with endless examples where there are massive rigidities being reintroduced into the system. Unions have now got a swagger back, the intimidation, in some cases the criminality.
But he's already policy has been made in one small area, but I guess a very significant area. Tony Abbott ruling out statutory individual contracts.
Well, our view is that we can restore significant flexibility into the system, but we need to wait until we have had it clearly identified where are the hotspots in industrial relations that we must deal with, and I can assure you we will deal with them, and in advance of an election people will know what steps we're going to take.
Do you support that decision, though, to rule out statutory individual contracts?
Well, it's a policy decision of the party, so I support all the policy decisions of the party.
Andrew Robb, many thanks for taking the time to talk to Lateline tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks, Ellie.